not around, have you found I'm always on your mind? And when you hear my name, does it sound the same as you felt when you heard it last time? Do you see flowers in my hair that aren't really there? Do you feel the pain when I'm blue? And when you see me, does it seem to be that blues change to life in bloom?
Welcome, everyone, to the Boiling Point Podcast. I am your host, JD, and I am being joined by our senior faith correspondent and producer, Pastor Gavin Whitcomb, Sr. of Moores Mountain Church. Make sure you give him a follow on YouTube and Facebook. Tell him that the Boiling Point Podcast sent you. Marcus Frederiksen does the music. Check him out, reverbnation.com/Marcus Frederiksen, and check out on Facebook, The Humankind, pick up some apparel. And of course, our storefront. Make sure you check out our storefront, bonfire.com/store/The Boiling Point Podcast. Pick yourself up some apparel, new apparel. Unfortunately, I can't turn all the way around, but the eagle is on the back of this shirt. This is what the front of it looks like with the established 2020 and the eagle on the back. So make sure you check out our storefront and give us a like, give us a share, leave us a comment. Pastor Gavin, sorry, I usually give you a chance to say hello and stuff, but I wanted to get some of that stuff out of the way right at the top.
Right. Oh, that's fine.
So welcome back, episode 109. And you just got back from vacation.
Yeah. Yep. About 2 weeks ago. But yes, I wanted to tell about my trip. My wife and I went out to it's Williamstown, Kentucky. And Kentucky shares a border with Ohio. So most people know where Cincinnati, Ohio is. So it's, right outside of Cincinnati, Ohio, but it's in Kentucky. So Williamstown, Kentucky. And there we saw the Answers in Genesis. They call it the Ark Encounter. So there they've built a life-size replica of the Ark, following the biblical dimensions. And so it's not just like you go there and look at, you see this big boat there. I mean, you do see a big boat there, but the inside of it is a very, very well done museum. And it's a museum about creation, about the flood, and about flood geology. And it just kind of tells about the flood and shows how, what the Bible says is quite feasible, and answers like questions that critics might have or might raise about the ark and about the flood.
Like, how did they keep so many animals on the ark?
Right. Yep. Yeah. So
the size of that thing must have been big, and we'll get some pictures we'll share on our social media. Then Pastor Gavin's going through his pictures. He's going to pick out some pictures that will that he's going to share with everybody. So we'll post them on the social media. We just didn't have time to get them prepared for this episode. I'm a little behind this week, but
it's a really nice place. It's so it's more than just the ark there. Like, it's kind of a place where if you wanted to take your family on vacation, I'd much rather go there than to Disney World. And it's a lot less expensive too. It's very reasonably priced. In fact, I think kids are free.
Okay.
So we attended a pastor's conference there. That was 3 days, and we got there a day early so we could tour the ark. But there's also like a nice playground for kids.
Oh wow!
And there's if somebody's into rip lines, I think they're called. You hang. Yeah, and slide on the rip lines. They have an extensive thing of rip lines.
Wow.
I guess for the older kids, the teens or whatever. And there are restaurants there, and just it's a nice kind of like a vacation thing.
Where did you stay when you were there?
We stayed at 2 different motels.
So they don't have it's not like a all inclusive thing where you sleep there also. It's just something that you visit during the day.
Right, but there are hotels close by.
Yeah.
Like there's one I think it's I forget what kind it is, but it's right next to the museum. In
Okay.
fact, there are 3 within a stone's throw of the museum, and then there are others in nearby towns.
Yeah.
So the ark was huge. They followed the biblical dimensions.
What are the biblical dimensions of the
Well,
ark?
God told Noah to make it 50 cubits wide, 300 cubits long, and 30 cubits high. So a cubit is an ancient measurement that goes from your middle finger, like if you're not being very nice and you want to do an obscene gesture at somebody, but from there to the end of your elbow. Now the thing is, that varies from people to people. You get a
Yeah.
real big guy, he's going to have a longer measurement, and so a lot of times a cubit was about 18 inches or so. And they had what was known as in ancient times as a royal cubit. So that was like 20.4 inches to, well, maybe 21 inches. Some of them, it varied. So answers in Genesis, they went by the royal cubit, 20.4 inches. Now that's smaller than like the larger royal cubit, which was over 21 inches, but they wanted to be conservative and not
Yeah.
not
Not
over,
blowing out of proportion.
or exaggerate.
Yeah. Or sensationalize.
Right. Yeah. So it's really an impressive structure. So inside there's a museum, and they explain how, like, a question skeptics might have: how could all those animals fit into the ark? And that's a very good question. Well, first of all, there were no sea creatures in there. I mean, fish and you know uh, uh, sharks, all kinds of aquatic life were not in the ark because they were in the water and they would have survived the water.
Yeah.
God told him to take 2 of every kind of thing that wherein is the breath of life. So that would not have included insects either, because insects could have floated around on, logs and so forth. They breathe through their skin. They don't breathe, air like we do, through our nostrils and into our lungs and so forth.
Yeah.
But the Bible does not say that God told Noah to take 2 of every species.
Yeah.
He said,
You said about that just a minute ago. You said 2 of
yeah,
every kind.
right.
Every kind. And we've
Right.
talked
He
about
said
that
it.
in an episode
Right.
before too.
Yeah, and I don't mind repeating this because some of our listeners may not have heard previous episodes,
Yeah.
but also sometimes people forget, and it's good to review things that are important.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
so yeah, so the result is if you take 2 of the various kinds of animals, that's different than species. So so there were 2 of every kind of unclean animal, 7 of every clean animal.
7 of every clean animal. Now, what
Yeah,
is the
yeah.
difference between an unclean and a clean animal?
Okay, well, in the law of Moses, the animals that were ceremonially clean were animals that they were permitted to eat, and they were identified by having a split hoof and they chewed the cud. So, in other words, like a cow, they have a split hoof and they have several stomachs and they eat grass, then they puke a little bit of it up and chew on it. And the same with deer, And there are a number of animals that fit that category.
Yeah.
And the reason why he was to take 7, since they were really intended as a better source of food, there would be 3 pair, and then 1 left to sacrifice, to the Lord. So now let's go back to the difference between species and kinds. The term species is a more modern convention. Kinds of animals, for example, there were 2 of the cat kind that went into the ark, and the 2 cat kind contained all the genetic variations that we find in various kind of cats today. So those 2 of the cat kind when they reproduced, there were all kinds of different varieties, just like there are all kinds of different varieties of people. I mean,
So
yeah,
for
we have.
example, for example, then like he likely didn't, assuming that the animals that we have today were the animals that he had back then. So he likely didn't take 2 lions and 2 cheetahs.
Right.
He
Yeah.
likely only took one of those pair.
Right. Yeah. So it would have been some sort of big, large cat, no doubts. That it might have been something between, looked kind of lionish, but sort of like a tiger, or but anyway, then after the flood and those animals come out and reproduced, different varieties manifested themselves, just like with dogs. There are all kinds of different varieties of dogs, but they're still dogs.
Yeah.
So these varieties became evident, and some of them were so different from the others that they quit interbreeding, and eventually they lost their ability to interbreed. And we call them species. Now, some of these varieties can still interbreed. I've heard of tigers and lions interbreeding, and they get ligers.
Yeah, ligers,
Yeah,
and you can also do it the other way and get tigons. The
yeah,
problem is that usually when you do that, and I actually know some information about this, Pastor. So it's nice to be able to contribute to this a little bit. Yeah, the ligers though, ligers can't reproduce. They can have lions and tigers reproduce, but then ligers can't actually reproduce on their own
hmm,
because of the problems with the genetic materials between the two species. They are
yeah,
compatible, but there are mistakes, and one of them is that they usually can't reproduce. And
yeah,
sometimes ligers also they also have a problem with their the gland, actually the same as humans do, where they continue to grow. It just continues to they just continue to grow and become so large under their own frame. Tigons are pretty cool too. They're a little smaller, but I don't think they have the ability to reproduce by themselves either, though. So we
hmm,
can, the ligers and the tigons can be made or created, but not they can't self-sustain. They can't reproduce themselves.
yeah. And so that happens with different animals. The same with, there were, I'm sure there were not 2 German shepherds and 2 Irish setters. There were 2 of the dog kind, probably something like wolves.
Yeah,
And from them, the same genetic potential for all kinds of variety was within their genes, and they became manifested, and some of them became, separated from one another, and developed into what we would recognize and identify and call species. And so
well, wouldn't
so if,
that would, if I could, Professor, would
Mhm.
that not have come then from what we've talked about before, the de-evolution
Yeah,
of the species, because the genetic
yeah,
materials have been reproduced and recopied so many times that that's how the difference in species started to happen, was because of a mutation.
yes, yeah. Yeah, and then some of them, then the genetic variability was lost. So yeah, that so now uh, there were fewer than 34,000 species, but if you take those and boil them down to the original kinds were like less than 7,000. And the average size of the animals would have been about the size of the sheep. And there are people who have done the math. Approximately 6,744 animals were inside the ark.
Wow.
But if there are people that have done the math, and there was plenty of room in an ark that size uh, to house all those animals, plus food that they would have needed. Now, personally, I believe this, and I can't prove this. There's not a verse in the Bible about it, but
So we're in
uh,
speculation. We're speculating
right,
here.
yeah.
Yeah.
But a lot of animals, when they sense that there's going to be a really bad storm, they go to sleep, or they go into a state of hibernation or semi-private hibernation.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't be surprised if God would have made the majority of those animals to go into a hibernated state.
Yeah.
where their needs for food and water would not have been as crucial. But at the Ark Museum, they have some illustrations of some ways that the feeding and the watering and the removal of animal waste would have been, possible ways that they may have done, dealt with those things,
Yeah, that's
managed.
cool. That's cool to think about. When you're
Yeah.
a kid and you're in Sunday school, you learn about, 2 by 2 they went on the ark,
Mm,
um, to learn though that it was just two of certain animals, but seven of other kinds of animals is pretty interesting. And
mm,
to think about that, like the food, like the waste, like the animal waste, how do they dispose of that? The food, how do they manage to feed all those animals? You're talking about 8 people, if I'm not mistaken, right? It was
mm.
Noah and his wife,
Yeah.
his two sons, and their wives.
Mm.
So, six, not 8. Or did he have three
Yeah,
sons?
there was a total of 8 people. Yeah. So Noah and his wife had 3
Three
sons.
sons. I'm sorry. Yeah.
Yeah, so his 3 sons and their wives. Yeah.
So there were 8 people. Yeah, Noah,
Mm,
his wife, and their 3 sons and their wives.
yeah.
So you're talking about 8 people caring for what you just said, 6,700 and some odd animals.
Mhm.
That's you
Yeah,
know,
it's a formidable task. But,
I,
think of this, people lived to be a lot longer. They lived to be a lot older then.
true.
And so they were no dummies. And if God called them to this task, like he would have equipped them and given them the strength and the wisdom and at the museum it shows like potential ways where they likely were able to store food and deliver it to the animals, and it's hard to really explain and describe,
Yeah,
but
I would imagine that's
but
something you have to see. Yeah.
yeah,
So, well, we'll give him a little plug. What is the name of it? Can you
it's called the Ark Encounter.
The Ark Encounter. So check
Yeah,
out the Ark Encounter and check it
yeah.
out for yourselves.
And another way
And
you could find information on it would be the AIG, or Answers in Genesis. That's the organization that it's their project, and they sponsored the whole thing. And
okay, I'll also look up their information before we get this episode posted. So
mhm.
look for links in the description, and you can follow it there.
Yeah, so they also do a very good extensive job at flood geology. Like, what is flood geology? Well, you look at the earth and its geology, how it's built, and you can see clear-cut evidence of a worldwide flood. So, all of us could look at the Grand Canyon, or we could go to the side of a road where they cut away the hill and cut away the rock to make the highway, wider, and we can see different layers of rocks. And the evolutionist looks at that and says, "Oh, look, a record of millions of years." But we look at that evidence and say, "No, that's not a record of millions of years. That's a record of a worldwide cataclysm, a flood." Most of those layers are sedimentary rock. What's sedimentary rock? Rock made from sediment. What's sediment? Well, that's like uh, dirt that is moved by water. It's mud, and then it turns to rock. And those layers are very clear and distinct from one another. There's no sign of topsoil between them or erosion. How could there be a layer and for millions of years and no topsoil? They don't represent layers of millions of time. They represent layers of flood deposits of mud, and in those sedimentary rocks that were formed from mud, there are billions of plants and animals all over the world in the crust of the earth, and they became fossilized. And John, we've talked about this before. In fact, we have a really good episode about why the age of the earth is often over exaggerated.
Yep, I was gonna plug that
Yeah,
episode next. Yep,
yeah,
I don't remember the
I don't
number
either,
episode, but
but
it's Earth and why its age is overestimated. Make sure
yeah,
you check that episode out
yeah.
because it's a really great episode and very very informative.
So when so I think I explained there that When plants or animals die, they rot away,
Yeah.
or like erosion erodes them, or something eats them. If nothing else, bacteria eats them. So
Yeah.
they don't form fossils. The only way fossils can be formed is if that plant or animal is very suddenly buried. So rapid
Rapidly.
burial. Yep,
Yeah.
rapid burial in mud and water. Now, how is it that all over the earth in these different layers, we find billions and billions of plants and animals that were buried and now are fossilized? Well, the flood would explain that, and it does. And here's another thing, John. The evolutionist looks at those layers and says, look, millions of years. But here's the thing, the flood occurred about roughly 45 to 4,600 years ago, 4,800 years, somewhere in that time frame. So that event would have totally rearranged the surface of the earth.
Yeah,
And,
you would
and
imagine.
it did. And it did. So any imagined record in the earth's crust of millions of years would have been erased.
Yeah.
It's like erase the tape. Because
Yeah.
we know what water can do, in one storm,
Yeah.
erosion. But just think a worldwide flood. Uh,
Yeah,
you know,
that is something people don't think about. I mean, when you get a flood in the neighborhood, and a tree erodes and falls
mm,
over, or
yeah,
a road was completely consumed, and then afterwards you can see all the leaves and the branches and everything that it was carrying with it just strewn across the entire road. That's just a small flood. When you're talking about a worldwide flood, I mean,
hmm
that's a number. That's a number of gallons that isn't even there's not even a word in our language that could say the amount of gallons that was on the planet, that's on the planet now, let alone when the flood happened.
right.
Especially because it was, as we discussed, it wasn't in I think our Genesis episode, actually, of a new series we have coming out. Stay tuned for that. um it wasn't just the rain that created the flood. It's not like it rained for 40 days and 40 nights and it rained so much that it was able to flood the entire planet. We talked about how it was
Yeah,
likely that there was some underground water, that there were earthquakes, or God
right.
shifted the plates, and water came up from the
Yep.
depth. And I believe it says so in the scripture, if I'm not
It
mistaken.
does. Yeah.
Yeah.
It
So
says the fountains of the deep, the windows of heaven were open, and the fountains of the deep were opened up. Yeah. So all kinds of water that was under the earth's surface come out, and no doubt from the crack in the ocean, you can still see it on a topographical map to this day. And John, all that volcanic activity in the ocean would have heated the oceans up, made them warmer. But with all the volcanic activity going on towards the surface, that would have blocked out a lot of the sun. So that would really create a lot of global cooling. And so that's what brought about the Ice Age. You had warm oceans producing a lot of precipitation, and then cooler atmospheres, and so that caused it to snow a lot, and the snow would build up, and before it could all melt away, the next season more snow was added to it. So that explains what brought about the Ice Age. And some people talk about ice ages, but I believe there was one ice age, and the ice may have advanced and then regressed and advanced and regressed, and people interpret that as, oh, different ice ages. I believe it was just one, but
ice,
yeah, it was quite extensive.
yeah, ice is regressing right now. We're not in an ice
Oh
age,
yeah,
but ice is regressing right now. You know what I mean?
yeah,
But eventually, assuming that we're not reaching the end of our world, it will likely, reintrude back down and come back down on us, at some point in time too.
yeah. It seems to go in cycles now. So people that believe the Earth is millions of years old, they look at the same evidence we do, but they draw different conclusions. Instead of seeing evidence for the flood, they think they're seeing evidence for millions of years, which their evidence would have been erased with the flood, so there'd be no record of it. Um, so, um, yeah, it's
I wanted to actually speculate again for a second, Pastor.
yeah.
Do you do you suspect, or would you suspect that does it say where the location of the waters came from? It just says from the deeps, right?
Yeah, the fountain of the deep were
So
open. The deep is a reference to the ocean.
And I just want to just throwing this out there just for a little FYI, the Mariana Trench in the Pacific Ocean, which is the deepest, I believe, is the deepest part that we're aware of or that we can explore, is 124. Oh, that's the wrong one. It's giving me the length. How is it not giving me the depth?
It's like 7 miles deep.
How is it not giving me the depth right here? That's unbelievable. So I am looking for the deepest point of the trench is more than 2 kilometers, 1.2 miles farther from sea level than the peak of Mount Everest.
Wow. I think I remember reading it was like 7 feet deep. Or 7 miles, I meant to say.
Yeah, I'm looking, put it this way, it's got I'm looking at the information for it, and it's got a math equation on the depth, on how deep it is, on how deep the deepest point of the Mariana Trench is. And it's right off the coast of Japan. It's pretty, actually, looking at it on the map, it's pretty interesting to look at, and, to think about. But anyways, it's very, very deep. I'm not that good at math. I couldn't possibly.
And
I couldn't
John,
possibly do that math equation they have there.
Well, see, there were billions of plants and animals, and I believe that there is probably more land surface on the earth and much more lush vegetation. And so that's, we are still being blessed by the benefit from these fossil fuels, these living things that were buried deep underneath the ground. So that's where we get coal and oil and natural gas. And, that's why they call them fossil fuels. They're the remnants of living things.
It's 36,000 feet deep.
Wow.
That's as far as scientists have been able to track. That's not necessarily the actual depth. That's just as far as we've been able to go. Or we've been able to track.
That's an astounding depth.
Another thing you got to think about all the different species and stuff, right? Pastor, we were just talking about that, about all the different species and the kinds is what I meant, the different kinds and how they evolve or devolved into the various species. Then, right? How many species could be in that trench or in the ocean? Because we have not explored as much of the ocean as we have on land. So how many species could be in that trench? You know what I mean?
Makes you wonder.
Yeah, you have to imagine that it is possible for one of the species that was alive in the flood to have survived and still continue to exist somewhere to this day, which is why they call certain whales, killer whales or whatever they call them, like kind of dinosaurs, crocodiles. They kind of call dinosaurs killer whales that are some of the oldest creatures on the planet. So, or at least they're claimed to be some of the oldest creatures on the planet.
Yeah, well, that would be according to their
but you have to wonder what could be down there where we can't even see.
Yeah, well, another way that they arrive at old dates, and they imagine that there's evidence for real deep time, is that they do ice core samples. Like they'll go to Greenland and they'll drill they'll have this bit, a hollow bit, and they'll get a core of ice, and they interpret each layer as a year. And but we've since then found evidence that doesn't work. You can't tell how many years are in an ice core because there can be multiple heating and cooling cycles in the same year. One thing that debunks that whole ice core way of dating the Earth is in World War II, there were a couple planes that were making their way, and they ran out of fuel, and the storm was real bad, and they landed off the coast of, I think, Greenland, and they're called the Lost Squadron, and so they were lost at sea, and somebody with a lot of money wanted to go and recover them, so they took sonar and explored that area. and they found that about 250 feet below the ice, these plains were located. And if you go and you drill ice core samples at 250 feet from World War II, you get and you get a lot more than the years since those
Since
planes
World
were
War II,
buried,
yeah.
because each ring that they're counting as a year is not a year; it's just a freeze-thaw cycle. There can be many of those multiple freeze-thaw cycles in one season. So
Yeah, that's
that,
one thing. Yeah, it doesn't
so
work like that. The temperatures around the Earth
yeah,
are changing all the time. That's why the whole global warming thing. We have the series going on that we're going to be trying to get to here. We're going to be trying to get back
yeah,
to here shortly or in the new year. Is that we know now man has been tracking and paying enough attention to the temperature now that we know the planet goes through cooling and warming cycles. And even though we've experienced some cooling and warming cycles within the short amount of time that we've been tracking the temperatures of the planet, it's much more likely that these warming and cooling periods take place over hundreds of years rather than just 10s or 20s or 30 years. It's much more likely that they happen over hundreds of years. And just because when you say warming, that doesn't mean it doesn't get cold. It just means that the overall temperatures tends to get warmer than cooler. So you can still have fluctuations in temperature.
yeah.
And we haven't been recording temperatures for that long either. We only have I believe Keith said the one episode, 150 years.
England has been doing it the longest.
Yeah, and even then, it's only, I think, 150 or 175 years, I think, or a little longer.
I think they started in maybe the 1600s, but
was it the 1600s? Okay,
maybe late. We'll have to check that out.
Yeah,
I think so. But
we'll
anyway,
check on that.
that's only one place,
and that's only that's only one. That's only one place.
Yeah, but I think like in the last, what you were thinking of, in the last like 150 years,
Yeah,
the United States probably has the most extensive like land-based thermometer type records.
yeah.
But there are other ways to tell the Earth's temperature through historical means, like what people write about them, and from artwork, and also from tree rings. So we know that during the time of Christ, there was a warming trend, and then there's kind of an ice age, and then there's the medieval warm period. Then we had another cooling period. So the idea that humans have this huge, massive effect on the Earth's temperature, I don't buy it.
Yeah.
Maybe we do have a little impact, but 90 to 95% of, in fact, I've heard one estimate, 97% of all greenhouse gases are water vapor and clouds. So we have nothing to do with that. Carbon dioxide represents a very small percentage of the rest of the pie.
Yeah, and plus, as we discussed in the episodes, our global warming episodes, when the Earth gets warmer, trees and food and crops, they like that.
Yeah,
because it means there's more carbon monoxide, and it means that they have more food to eat. So
then the plants would take up more.
Yeah. The evidence doesn't really match up with that.
Yeah,
but we got a little off topic there on a couple of things there, talking about Genesis and the Ark and stuff. But it all comes back to the Ark.
Okay, now about 30 to 45 minutes from the Ark Encounter is the Creation Museum. So we went and visited that too, and that it's just what it says. It explains the creationist view of the origin of the Earth, and it debunks evolutionism, and it just shows how evolutionism doesn't stand up to what we know to be scientifically true and accurate. It's not. It really doesn't have a real factual foundation to it in science.
Yeah,
it's more religious. Yeah.
Yes, I love. Yeah, we talked about that before too. Yeah, it's more. Yeah, people who believe in evolution are more have to have more faith than we do.
Yeah. Now here's something else that they point out at the Ark, and I think it's a good point to make. The Ark is a picture of salvation in Jesus Christ. Because, okay, why was there a flood coming? Judgment, because God saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth, right? So God was going to bring judgment. But Noah and his family found grace in the eyes of the Lord. And this ark, if they were in the ark, then they were safe from the flood. And there was only one door into that ark. And so the ark is a picture of salvation in Christ. Jesus is the door. And if we've repented and put our faith in Jesus Christ, then we are in him. And so we're saved from the judgment. So it's kind of a picture of faith in Christ
Yeah,
and
that's cool.
salvation. Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. And yeah, I never thought about that either.
Yeah. Yeah. So Peter makes that analogy.
Okay.
Yeah, in the New Testament. Yeah.
Okay.
So at some point we were going to talk about the basis of salvation. Is that'll be another episode, or
We're gonna do a simmer down segment.
Yeah,
We're gonna bring back the we're gonna bring back the simmer down
Yeah.
segments, and we're gonna do a simmer down segment on on salvation, because we just did an episode. We just did an episode on Israel, and we got into some of the talk there, and we started getting into things that I am not equipped to talk about, and or to, I'm just not equipped. I'm learning, but it takes time. I'm at least willing to admit, no, I don't have that information for you. And so we're going to cover a couple of those things. Before we wrap this episode up, though, I did want to ask you real quick, because you were on vacation. I mean, well, it was a dual purpose. It was a vacation, but it was sort of for work too, I guess, for you, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Did you get to see what was going on in the last week with Israel?
Yes, I have. Yeah, it's really despicable the way that Hamas has attacked Israel.
Yeah. I thought you were going to say the way the media is covering it, because I was going to.
Well, that is good. Yeah, it seems like there's way too much sympathy for Hamas,
dude. Even after I just called Pastor Gavin dude, for anybody who wanted to take notice, but I watched the president speak, and even though there were 3 or 4 moments where you're like, what did he just say? What was clear was that his own State Department, our own State Department, our own intelligence services don't think that Israel was responsible for bombing the hospital.
Mm-hmm.
And all I've heard since then on CNN is how Israel is responsible for bombing the hospital. It's like, dude, the president just spoke. He just said it's not Israel. He's confirming. He's saying, no, listen, our State Department, everything is saying no. It was Hamas bombing their own hospital.
Yeah, recently I saw footage. Glenn Shapiro.
Ben Shapiro?
Yeah, Ben. I call him Glenn.
Glenn Beck, Ben Shapiro.
Yeah, Ben Shapiro. He recently released a YouTube video where it showed drone footage of the rockets being fired by Hamas. And they were, they wanted them to go over into Israel, but it showed it going back and, exploding there at the hospital. Yeah.
I'm not convinced that Hamas didn't blow up the hospital intentionally.
Maybe to make it
look like it was Israel. It's like a counter, move there. But
yeah,
the media coverage has been horrendous. What are your thoughts, though, on what do you think? Does this have biblical implications, do you think?
Well, this is definitely not the Battle of Armageddon, because that will not take place until at least 7 years from now, because that'll be at the end of the Great Tribulation. But Ezekiel 38 and 39 do point to, at one point, an invasion by a number of nations into the land of Israel. And, I believe Russia will be a part of that, and Turkey and Iran and some of the northern African Islamic nations. But it says when they do that, they're going to get their butt kicked. God is going to supernaturally intervene and deliver Israel. So Whether this is the Battle of Gog or Magog or not, it's like that. In that they're attacked and now other nations are threatening to attack. That's the type of thing that's going to happen in the Battle of Gog and Magog. So whether this is actually it or not, it's too soon to say, but it's much like what the Bible says is going to happen at some point in the future. Yeah.
Okay. So, what are your thoughts? Because we have people even within our own country, protesting Israel defending itself from Hamas. Firing rockets back in. Yes, civilians are dying. Yes, civilians are being killed. Yes, children are being killed. It's terrible. It's absolutely terrible. For anybody who's watching this episode who doesn't like that, or who is for Hamas and Palestine and against Israel, please tell me, leave it in the comments, a war in which civilians and children didn't die by the hundreds and by the thousands. In war, that's what happens. It's terrible. It's terrible, but Israel's defending itself. They're trying to exist as a nation, and they can't do that when, they have a dome. They have a system designed to destroy rockets being fired into their homeland. How is there anybody that could not be on the side of Israel in this? How is that possible, Pastor? Do you understand?
Right. They were attacked, and they didn't do anything to deserve it.
People were kidnapped.
Yeah. Babies killed. Hamas intentionally attacked Israeli citizens. Now, what does Israel do? Well, when they deal with the problem and defend themselves, they send warning to the civilians to say, hey, you guys get out of the way because we're going to bomb and take out Hamas.
When they first started bombing, they weren't warning. When Israel first started bombing, they weren't sending warnings, which I also don't have a problem with. You're not going to tell your enemy you're coming. Hey, get out of the building. We're about to blow it up. What?
Yeah. You can't. That's not always practical, is it?
Yeah, and I understand. Yeah, civilians should be warned, but you know what? I'm sorry, but if I live in Palestine and after I just watched Hamas kidnap hundreds of people and brutally kill hundreds more, I'm getting the hell out of there because I know what's coming. Israeli rockets.
Right.
So,
and another thing,
isn't there doesn't some of the responsibility then have to be with the civilian population in Gaza?
Yeah. And here's another thing.
Terrorists. Go ahead.
Yeah. Hamas intentionally tries to put their rocket launchers and offensive weapons where innocent civilians are and uses them as human shields. So if Israel has to hit them, if Israel has to knock out the rocket launchers and all that, and innocent people get killed, it's not that they want to do that, but what are they supposed to allow their own nation to get killed and not defend their own people? So Hamas is to blame for that, in my view.
And that's of course you don't hear anybody from Palestine blaming Hamas. It's always Israel. It's Israel firing the rockets, but nobody has anything to say. And the news coverage has been horrendous. That's all I hear is about how Israel's firing rockets at civilians. And then and by the way, Hamas did kidnap 150 people and brutally killed a couple hundred more. They slipped that in like right at the end after they've been covering how evil Israel is for an hour. Then the last 5 minutes, 55 minutes is Israel's bombing civilians, and then the last 5 minutes, by the way, Palestine did kidnap people and send rockets into Israel too. And parachuted troopers into their areas and killed people in their own homes. But of course, that's all secondary. That's all, the last 5 minutes is all the coverage that needs.
Well, see, the war, the war is not really over land. It's a religious war because Hamas is, they're militant Muslims. And the Muslims who are really serious about their faith, they have this hatred for Jews, and they believe that Allah wants them to kill and destroy Jews and eliminate the nation of Israel. That's the real root cause of this.
And then for anybody watching, I want to be clear about what Pastor Gavin just said there, and that is the reason. It has nothing to do. I always hear that, well, Israel's an occupying force. Israel's an occupying force. Then tell them to get the hell out of there. They're not being kept there. No one's forcing the Palestinians to stay in Gaza. No one is. If you don't want to be there, get out. Okay, this land was given to Israel after World War II. It belongs to them. They have rights to it going back hundreds of years, all the way since the beginning of time.
Yeah.
So
Let me just, for our viewers, lay out the case for Israel's right to the land. First of all, the title deed to it was given to them by God. Like God told Abraham, I'm to you and to your seed, I'm giving this land. And the seed that received that promise was his son Isaac, not Ishmael. The Arabs came from Ishmael. That promise was given to Isaac and then to Jacob. Jacob's name was changed to Israel. The land was given to them. And so then they, through their unfaithfulness to God, they lost possession of it. And the Romans scattered them throughout the earth, especially in 135 AD or 134 during the Bar Kokhba rebellion. And so for a while, the Romans wouldn't allow them to come back in the land. Different people ruled it, but eventually the League of Nations recognized their need for a place to live and gave them that land. And the UN ratified that. So God gave them the title deed to it, the right to live there. Then international law through the League of Nations and the UN. Then they also wanted, when the Jews started moving back into the land, they started buying the land. So Jewish people were buying the land, sometimes at exorbitant prices. So the land is there because Jews bought it. But not only that, it's theirs because they were attacked. And the same kind of thing, when they declared their independence in 1948, 5 neighboring Arab nations attacked them. And against overwhelming odds, they won. And then through their successive wars, they've won it by war as well. So all those legal channels, did God ever give the land to the Palestinians? No. Did UN? Well, initially there was supposed to be a partition of land with the Palestinians sharing some of it with Israel, and although all they had to do is live in peace, and the Arabs would never agree to that. Yeah. They would not agree to accept Israel's right to exist.
Yeah, for all the people out there who think a 2-state solution is the answer, we've already been through that. They've had that opportunity and didn't want it. So, all these people are just blowing smoke. It's just ridiculous. All these
they
people
want Israel eliminated.
Yeah. It belongs to Israel. It's theirs. And as far as I'm concerned, there should be tens of thousands of American troops on their way to Israel right now to be digging trenches and putting up fences and with M16s to be backing them up. That's where I come down on it, because I mean I can't imagine being in Israel right now, because they are under attack. They are literally at war right now. So, and I can't imagine being at war with the war. We live in America, so we've been very lucky. We've been very fortunate, except for the Civil War and the Revolutionary War. Our shores have not known war. We don't see it down the street. It's not a couple miles away. We can't see the explosions in the distance. We watch it on CNN.
We've been so blessed. We have a moat around us, practically on 3 sides.
Yeah,
the Atlantic, Pacific, and the Gulf of Mexico, and then Canada to the north is a friendly nation, and we're not at war with Mexico either.
No, we're not officially at war with Mexico, or at least not with the government of Mexico, at least. Yeah. But that's we don't know. Yeah, we don't see it. We don't see it like that. We see different things. We see in cities. We see the war on drugs and kids being killed and police being blamed and the continued divide in our own community. But we don't see real war, not like that. Not like what's going on in Israel. We don't have rockets coming into our neighborhoods. We don't have people dropping in on parachutes to kidnap women and children. So I can't imagine being in Israel right now and living with that kind of a threat. How do you do that?
not to be a real bummer or Mr. Negative, but if we as a nation do not repent and turn back to God, God may continue to remove that hedge of protection that we've enjoyed all these years. I mean, it's a blessing, but yeah, if our nation keeps turning its back on God, can we expect him to continue to protect us? So, we could be vulnerable to all sorts of things. Well, like what happened with 9/11.
Yeah.
So
And
I'm thankful we haven't seen what you were talking about. We haven't seen that here.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, even though it has happened, I mean, Benghazi is a good demonstration of that too. It wasn't on our shores, it wasn't on our shores. We didn't get to see it right down the road, but it happened in an American embassy. That's technically American soil. So, you know what I mean? They're getting bolder. Things are getting bolder, and it's coming to a head. So as far as I'm concerned, we should be out there. We're helping Israel and backing them up.
Yeah. Yeah.
Amen. And anybody who's against Israel right now, I don't understand your point of view. And you just can't. The history with the Arab people and the Muslims and the Palestinians, they want to kill Jews, and they want to bomb people who don't believe what they believe. Anybody trying to argue against that, you're just not following your own faith. And I'm gonna likely that statement alone is likely gonna get me some hate mail or some comments. But you know what? That's the way it is. I'm sorry. Well, at least that's just my opinion. Hi, I'm JD, and this is my show.
Yeah.
So anyway, Pastor, well, I think that's where we're gonna finish it then. I'm going to be doing a follow-up to Israel to talk about the events, not about the biblical side. I think we've sufficiently covered that at this point. Between our episode, we did the episode. It was covering on Ukraine, but it's still talking about the same thing. It's still talking about the battle of Gog and Magog, and about the final battle. So check that episode out, and tune in. We're going to do a Simmer Down segment. Look for that in a couple of days, about salvation with Pastor Gavin. So, and leave us a comment anywhere you want. Leave us a comment and we'll talk about it on a future episode. Follow Pastor Gavin on YouTube and Facebook. All you have to do is search Gavin Whitcomb Sr. and you will find him, or Moores Mountain Church on Facebook, facebook.com/mooresmountain.church on Facebook. Make sure you subscribe to his YouTube channel. He's had some videos getting some traction. We want to keep that going for him. So check him out on YouTube. Give him a view, give him a comment, and share out some episodes so that we can get him some more traction. We have I have another episode. Look for some episodes over the next 2 weeks. We have a couple of them coming out. I have one on Facebook harassment and fake profiles. I'm working with a lot of information and a lot of stuff to put that together. So I'm still working to get that all together, but I got that episode coming as well. We got the follow-up to Israel. Marcus Frederiksen does the music. Make sure you check him out. ReverbNation.com/Marcus Frederiksen. Our storefront, if you want to support us further, is bonfire.com/store/The Boiling Point Podcast. This is the new one. It's got the eagle on the back. I'm not going to be able to turn far enough for you to be able to see it, but it's got the established 2020 on the front. It's got the eagle on the back. Pick one up, support the show, and at the very least, hit the like button and hit the share button. For Pastor Gavin, senior faith correspondent and producer, I am your host, JD, and this has been episode 109, and that's the end.
Bye.